Last week, I had said something about in a certain passage, and I got a little scrambled in finding where it was. It's actually Exodus 34. I made a mention of the fact that Yahweh said to keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He didn't say to keep Passover. Well, that was within a context. I want to clarify that because someone brought it to my attention saying I did a severe injustice to the instructions. What I was trying to say last week was not, oh, you don't have to keep Passover. I wasn't saying that. I was saying here he zeroes in with a spotlight on the festival of matzah. Why? Well, look at the context of what he's saying. He says, listen, they have their rituals and feasts. And if you blend, amalgamate with them, you're going to get sucked into giving regard because you don't want to be rude. You're going to give some kind of a regard, even if it's bowing down or eating their sacrifices. It's just going to happen. And he's giving this week of matzah to eat matzah, almost like let's call it like a vaccine or an antidote. Do this for 1 week in the spring, eat unleavened bread. Something about that is going to keep us. It's going to be so offensive to them that they're not going to want to be in covenant with us. Or it'll somehow mess with our minds and we won't enter in that type of covenant with them. We won't give children to be intermarried. Why does he zero in? And again, he's not saying Passover, though we do keep Passover, and Passover is just the evening before, the night of the 14th, or the evening of the 14th, and then the beginning of the day of the 15th, and for 1 week, you eat unleavened bread. Then he goes on to say, verse 19, every first issue of the womb is mine. Why does he bring that up? And then in verse 21, 6 days shall you work, and on the seventh day you shall desist. You shall desist from plowing and harvesting. Plowing and harvesting. What about all the other jobs? What about washing your car? What about building a house? Desist from plowing and harvesting? See, whatever he says, whatever he doesn't say, he said other things in other places. And for people then to say, we're going to make a doctrine. Like I said, my friends went to a certain church and they said on the Sabbath day, really hot day, Southern California, okay, you can take your family to the lake, but the water can only come up to your knee. If the water goes higher than your knee, that's a sin on the Sabbath day to go to the lake on a really hot day. So you can stand in the water up to your knee and that's it. That's the line of kadeshness, of sacredness. It's okay for the water up to there, but after that, you're in big trouble. Who comes up with this stuff? I don't know. I'm sure they had a reason. But my point is, I'm not going to sit here and make up reasons. And when somebody asks me, hey, what are we supposed to do on the Sabbath day? What do we do? What do we not do? I can read these words. And you can say, well, what is the word plow and what is the word harvest? Well, we can look at those words. But there's another place he says, you will make the Sabbath day. Make the Sabbath day what? Finish the sentence. You will ayin shin hey, the Sabbath day, Yom Shabbat. It's almost like he's telling each one of us, you make it the Sabbath. Yeah, but what if my idea is different than the other idea, or your idea different than their idea? It's like, that's up to you. For me to say, well, he did give us a list of things. For example, Exodus 12. And so when I said last week, did he give us a bunch of list of bullet points? And I was told, he certainly did. All right. You go back to Exodus 12, verse 15. You could say, this day will become a remembrance for you, Zakar, and you shall celebrate a festival for Yahweh for your generations. An eternal decree shall you celebrate it. Okay, there's the command to keep Passover. He said, for this people group, so by these Moedim, he's establishing a cultural identity, the kingdom of heaven, an eternal decree for your generations. Well, that means we should be doing it right now, right? Isn't that part of this? For a 7-day period, you shall eat matzah. He didn't say, now do the Passover, now do unleavened bread. He kind of blends these two together. So there's this blending of Passover and matzah, just like there's a blending of Sukkot and Shemini Atzeret. For a 7-day period, you shall eat matzah. But wait a minute, if you keep it from 7-day period plus Passover, that's 8 days. But on the previous day, you shall nullify the leaven from your homes. So the previous day, so on the day of the 14th, which would be Passover day, that's the day that you nullify leaven from your homes. For anyone who eats leavened food, that soul shall be cut off from Israel, from the first day to the 7th day. This is pretty severe stuff. Cut off from Israel. Next verse, 16. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. On the 7th day shall be a holy convocation. No work may be done, except for what must be eaten for any person. Only that may be done. You shall safeguard the matzahs from this very day. I've taken your legions out of the land of Egypt. You shall observe this day for your generations as an eternal decree. So for the Christians to say, at large, I'm just saying the Christians, the big concept to say the Jews don't accept Jesus as the Savior, so they're all going to burn in hell. They're not, none of them are saved. But the Jews could look back at Exodus 12 and say, well, none of the Christians are attached to Israel. They're all going to be cut off. Cut off? Yeah, like, wheat and tares, cut them off and throw them in the fire. Because even in the New Testament, it says we have to be ingrafted to the commonwealth of Israel. So none of them are getting in. Nobody's getting in. You shall not eat any leavening, verse 20. In all your dwellings shall you eat matzahs. And then he goes on to describe how you have to be circumcised, verse 44. A sojourner and a hired laborer may not eat it. You shall not break a bone of it. What I'm saying is you could write up a whole checklist of things you're supposed to do. Well, yeah, but what if we don't do it? Does that mean we're going to burn in hell? It's like, so the interesting thing about this is that for him to say these Moedim are more than just festivals, there's something about his identity wrapped up in these Moedim. There's something about his kingdom, the essence, the consciousness, the structure of the universe, his kingdom of heaven that we, thy kingdom come, thy will be done, is in these Moedim. Then to see that the Moedim are the structure of the alphabet, which is the Mishkan pattern. If we don't see Yahuwah Zavot, the Elohim of Israel, the maker of heaven and earth, Elkanah, who's passionately jealous about his stuff, which he says is the Moedim, his choice best personal adornment. If we don't see any of that, then who the heck are we loving and following if we won't walk in his ways? And if we don't keep these Moedim, observe these festivals, why aren't we? Because we don't know him? Does he know us? Does having oil as one of the bridesmaids have something to do with considering the reckoning of these matters? That's literally Shin Mem Nun is the word for oil. Aleph Mem Nun, amen, so be it. I will count. I will Shemen, oil, Shemini Atzeret. To take these matters to heart. That's what he said to do. That's his people. Just because we don't know all the details, we've inherited lies upon lies, cultural infection of lies and unkindness, obstruction of justice for thousands of years. And all of a sudden, here we are. To say this is the moment of Pezadi, the open mouth, the open understanding, the open language. This is an incredible time. For me to say, okay, now I've got the understanding of the calendar, and you have to do it just like I see. Far be it from me to do such a thing. So for my friend to say, listen, last week, well, like with Fred, just before Fred started to speak, I said, hey, listen, we don't know what the calendar is. We don't know what shape the earth is. We don't even know what we're supposed to do on the festivals, and it's all up for grabs. And okay, here you go, Fred. It's like, boy, you just, I'm going to tear apart your podium and then have you stand there. And it's like, what are you doing, man? Did I really tear everything apart? Well, it looked that way. It felt like that. But what I'm saying is, don't trust me. You got to trust. Work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You got to trust these words. You must take to heart every single one of these words. We're trying, what I think this is that we're collectively together conducting this study. I'm seeing things, other people are seeing things, and in the words and saying, what did he mean by this? There's something written in nature, but what? Well, the Yod, the hand of Yod He Vav He, he created nature. So the communique is in nature. Hey, the Hey of the expression of the Yod, well, he gave us the Torah. That's a verbalized expression and a written expression from the Creator himself. So I see that as Yod Hey. Vav, the number 6, the number of man. Mashiach, the man who's the incarnation of the Torah, the Vav, which is the Hey of the Yod. And then Yeshua said, hey, I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to go away and send you the Ruach, the Comforter, to the Comforter. That's like the word Rechem that we just read about, the one who will lead you into the truth. So he's going to lead you as the Hey of the Vav, which is the Vav of the Hey of the Yod. Well, there's Yod Hey Vav Hey, the way to read these 4 aspects. And they're not separate voices. They're a singular, echad, all 4 in a row. And if one's out of whack, I must misunderstand something. So he gave us this as a way of alignment. And I could say, well, there's actually 22 that have to line up perfectly, all 22 letters. When you see all 22 letters, echad, that's him, that's his voice. What does that mean? Well, that's the study. And part of that is you got to make Shabbat. You got to make it your own Shabbat. Maybe similar to somebody else, it may not be. It's like, hey, that's on you. I could sit there and say, we better not work on Shabbat, but work out doing what? Don't plow and harvest, that's for sure. I mean, I can build a house. I'm not going to build a house on Shabbat. No way. Find the verse that says we can't work on Shabbat building a house. Hey, you better start looking. If you want to walk in his ways, how do you keep Pesach? Does everybody have to cut the throat of a lamb and bleed it out and paint its blood on? That's what he said. How many people do that? I know some who do, and I've participated, but am I going to tell everybody if you don't do that, you're going to burn in hell? You're not going to be his people? I'm not going to say that, but if I could say you better read what he said to do on Pesach. And then when you read what he said to do on Pesach and you realize people are doing all kinds of things on Pesach. They're doing and they're not doing. And you need to determine for yourself, how am I going to go along with this? If you live in an apartment in the middle of the Bronx, are you going to grab a lamb and cut its throat? And gosh, you'll have the authorities on you. What am I suggesting? That you can't? No, I'm suggesting that maybe you find some other people that can, because we're not supposed to keep that moed by ourselves. What? Hey, we're trying to figure out how to walk in his ways. I'm not trying to give anybody a list of do what I think is right. I'm not trying to do that. And I apologize if somebody thinks that's what I was saying. So I've been told by people that you better not lead people astray. Either too much this way or too much that way. It's like, hopefully what this is figuring out how to understand, each one of us personally understand, what did he say? What does that mean? And now what are we each going to do about it? And if we can do it together, collectively, whether it's online or over the phone, or hopefully even in close proximity to each other, that's a better thing. But the idea that we can trust what's in this language because it came from him. I'm not trusting Greek or Latin or English or some other dogmatic authority. I'm trusting that the letters themselves carries his signature, and he did it that way on purpose. And the fact that I can see that the letters in the alphabet are orchestrated, and for me to say the sentence, I don't know what I can trust, but I see that I can trust this. It's because I can trust that he gave us this in kindness and truth. He gave us in his kindness this reckoning of truth, these 22 letters in this order, as the fundamental basis of what's true. And then for David to say, your Torah is truth, but what do you really write? I know there's something else in there. Can you open my eyes, please? Psalms 119, verse 18. And I believe that David was shown something about this. We know that we can count on the truth. That's a huge thing that most people just don't have. Well, I choose to believe. Okay, well, you can choose to believe anything. Have faith in your faith. The interesting thing is, you can read the Bible text and come to that determination. If you see Yahweh's revelation of himself in his words and letters and in every instruction of the Torah, then that becomes the primary foundation, the Amad Basodi of Jeremiah 21. Everybody knows Amad Basodi, you know, the pillars anchored to what he built. Man's ways returned on his own head. That's what's apparent because he built it that way. Anyway, the meaning of these 22 letters, the way they're organized. Now believe that what he said is true and act like it. Have faith in your faith. Have confidence. Have betoch, bet-tet, het in his aleph mem nun. In the sureness of what he told us to trust. See, once I understand these things, then every word, every sentence, every concept, every doctrine becomes interpreted according to how the structure of this language works. And to me, that's a completely novel thing, a psychological processing, a structural regard of the universe, like the periodic table, like doing algebra, or geometry, or calculus. Understanding things are built in a certain way that have to work. What an incredible gift of insight we have in this. And when he zeroes in, you got to keep unleavened bread. Why that? Because there's something about that one. But then he goes on in the next verse that says, the seventh day, and also then verse 23, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the, well, here it says, Lord Hashem, the God of Israel. It's Adonai Yahweh, Elohim Israel. For I shall banish nations before you and broaden your boundary. No man shall covet your land when you go up to appear before Yahweh, your Elohim, 3 times a year. 3 times a year. So does that mean only 3 festivals? Let's see, there's Matzah, Shavuot, and Sukkot. Why didn't he mention the other 4? It's 3 times. If you show up for Matzah, you're probably going to be there for the evening before, which is Passover. So that's included in the one. Shavuot, is it all 50 days, or is it just the 50th day? And then in the fall, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret. Well, that's just called the ingathering harvest. He didn't say, oh, just that one festival. He said that time. Do we all have to go to Jerusalem? Figure out for yourself. I think it would be a nice thing to do, but is that required, or else you're going to burn in hell? Gosh, or else he doesn't know you, or is that, what's the downside of not doing what he said? He said the upside was, I will banish nations before you. No man will covet your stuff. Don't worry about somebody robbing your house when you leave to come to the Moed, the festival, because I'm going to put the fear, the terror of their own way coming back on them if anyone thinks to rip you off while you're gone, while you're observing the worship of Yahuwah. We have to take on this whole new consciousness, hence the concept of building a consciousness, that whole talk. Anyway, we're out of time for an hour. I got to get to work. We should probably stop the recording